Thank you, guys. Hello, everyone. My name is Amaya. I really appreciate all of you coming out to learn more about how athletes define gossip and perceive its impact on their teams. I grew up playing sports since the age of 3, and I'm still in sports today. And as I got older and gained more experience, I was on some winning teams and some losing teams. And what I learned from that is that there's a lot of factors that go into success. And while skill, like technical skill, endurance, things like that, are super valuable and important, one factor that was very unavoidable to think about was connection on a team. So, do the players like each other? Do they respect their coach? Does their coach respect them? And when I started to think about my thesis, I was super excited to talk about connection on a team, and more importantly, disconnection on a team. So today, we are going to zero in on gossip, and I'm so grateful y'all came to learn more. So I'm going to take you through my introduction, which we will cover what the literature has said about gossip, what we know, what we don't know. I'm going to take you through my methods that I use to add more to this conversation. I'm going to take you through my results, and then together we will reflect on my learnings. So let's talk about gossip. What we know about gossip is that at the end of the day, it's a form of communication. It's a way to share information. And we know that it's a form of social bonding. Robin Dunbar is a big contributor to this conversation and did some research where we saw different species using social bonding in different ways that mirror the way that humans use bonding as well. It's also a form of reputation management. If I'm an employer and I get a call that says, "Hey, was Olivia a good employee?" I now have the power to be like, no, she was not. And that's what I mean by reputation management. We also know that it reinforces team norms and social hierarchies. Gossip can sometimes be used as a form of currency. So if I come up and I'm like, "You won't believe what Taylor did at work today," you're automatically going to be like, "You have to tell me what she did," instead of being like, maybe this isn't a conversation I should be a part of. So what's missing from this conversation? What's missing is, as I was going through the research, a lot of these articles would try to define gossip, and none of their definitions were synonymous. There's a lot of blank spaces. Is it helpful? Is it hurtful? We're not sure. So now I'm going to walk you through my methods that I use to add to this conversation. So I interviewed 10 participants. Here are some of their demographics. They were about 40% of them came from male teams and 60% of them came from female teams. 40% of them were NCAA athletes and 60% of them were club sport athletes. And the criteria for the participants were that they had to be at least 18 and their name had to be on a roster so I could find their email. So here are some of the questions that I asked them. I asked them to define gossip. I asked them to then define information sharing. I asked them if they felt comfortable confiding in their leadership about issues pertaining to gossip. I asked them if they thought you could use gossip as a tool. And then I asked if they thought there were any preventative efforts to stop or maintain gossip on their team. And here is what I found. When I asked athletes to define gossip, we saw 4 themes emerge: negative, intent, false, and absence. When I asked people to define gossip, I saw sour faces, or a lot of, my mom told me I shouldn't do that. Negative connotations, sharing with ill intent. We see a lot of things that point to gossip is malicious. Also, this idea that gossip is false information. And then lastly, the idea that the person you're talking about has to be absent for gossip to be true. So this person defined gossip as sharing something without clear information. There's some ambiguity, and you present it as factual, but you're also kind of lying, and it's also kind of the half-truth. What was interesting is when I then introduced the concept of information sharing, their definition of gossip became a lot clearer, because then gossip is now false and information is now true or objective. And another idea is that information sharing has a purpose, like Katie's not going to be at practice today. I'm talking about Katie and she's not here, but there's purpose in what I'm sharing. So this person said that information sharing is factual, based on evidence, and the information is correct. I then asked athletes how they thought gossip impacted their team. And the two themes we saw from this were that there are physical answers and emotional answers. Physical being like, yeah, I can definitely tell when our vibes are off on the field because our vibes are off the field. Our performance decreases, we're not making as many connections. And then there's the emotional side, where there's division, trust issues, cliques, drama, which all eventually impact their physical performance as well, according to my participants. So this person said that they think it really negatively impacted their performance. People begin to not feel welcomed, they get into each other's heads, and it starts to create a negative environment. I asked my participants then if they felt comfortable bringing up issues of gossip to their leadership. And this question was super interesting because there was a big disparity in the NCAA athletes and the club sport athletes. My club sport athletes were super excited to say yes, that they trust their leadership, and the reason that is because their leadership are students. So it's a lot easier to go in class and be like, girl, like you gotta fix this issue that we're having on our team because we're friends. And the coaches that we do have are contracted, so it feels like a little bit easier of a situation to navigate. But they had good relationship with their coaches and leadership and believed that it was part of their job to handle things like that. Then my NCAA athletes came in with more of a no, because they feared consequences, or they feared what would happen during these situations. Ideas of what are they going to do about it? If I bring you this information, or am I going to face backlash? Am I going to get less playing time because I created something on a team? Stuff like that. And then we have our mix of it depends, which is valid because it really does depend on the situation. But yeah. This is a quote from someone who did not feel comfortable going to their coaches because they don't know how to approach that. And they normally go to their captains, which makes sense. They think their coaches are approachable, but they don't know how they react. It's a very vulnerable thing to bring up a situation to someone who's being paid to teach you skill about something that is emotional. And then this is someone who did feel comfortable going to their coaches because they're responsive and it's part of their job. I then asked my athletes if they thought that gossip could be helpful or as a tool. The way I framed the question was, when is it helpful to talk about someone who's absent? And there were two ideas that came out of this, which were something positive. So someone said planning a senior night, planning a birthday, and this player's having a hard day, we should do something to lift them up. And then there's the idea of intervention. So whenever a teammate is really struggling and you're intervening on behalf of them. So here is, if a teammate is struggling with substance and with relationship issues. The last question I asked, which was my favorite one, was how would you prevent gossip if you could? The number one answer I got to this had to do with culture. So it was things like, we all need to be friends and like each other and love each other and want to hang out. So more team bonding, more honesty and openness. Someone even suggested meeting once or twice a semester, getting an anonymous box where you can write down all your grievances, have your coach go through it, and then decide what to do from there. Another idea was that gossip is unending. So it's difficult to control. If 3 or more people are present, then it's not going to go away. And lastly, there's the idea of individualism. So we can try to help these people not gossip or be good, but is this just an issue that deals with character? If I'm raised in a family where gossip is how I learn things, I didn't even know my brother was doing this until my sister started telling me about it, then it might be harder to implement things that prevent gossip. So this person said it's never going to go away. I truthfully think it never leaves. So let's reflect. The takeaways I gained from my participants is that gossip is multifaceted and very pertinent in most groups. According to my participants, it's generally not helpful, and it comes down to the line of is it true or false, subjective or objective. My recommendations from my research and from personal lived experience is transparency in the beginning. If I'm an athlete and I have an issue to bring up, who do I ask about that? How do I communicate with them? Do I do it over email? Are we chatting after practice? What does that look like, and what is going to be done about it? I also think leadership trainings would be super beneficial for coaches, officers, captains, etc. Because I can teach you how to do skill well, but if I can't hold the space for you to feel welcomed and belonging, and feel like you belong in my environment, then am I really a leader of a team? And then my limitations with this research are my sample size. I also have a limitation in leadership because so many of my participants were captains and officers. I wish I had a closer gender split. And then there's just ambiguity in this topic, so it's a little bit harder to research. In future research, I would love to explore more of the subgroups of my flowcharts. I would love to understand more about the leadership that happens between captains and players specifically, since they're not coaches per se, and then just dig more into team culture. Here are all my sources. Thank you guys so much.
We'll start out with the Q&A, so if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand.
How effective do you find leadership in sports at actually being used?
Say that last part again.
How effective do you feel leadership in sports is actually acting gossip?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
How effective is leadership in sports at handling gossip?
That's a great question. This is from my experience and not as much with research on coaches, but I do think there is like a tone that leaders can set across teams. And if coaches implement captains that are good at stopping conversations like this, then I do think it can be helpful, but at the college level, I'm not sure. But thank you for your question. Clint?
So you mentioned one of your limitations was that you weren't able to get as many differences in the genders, I think, in your responses. From what you did find, could you tell, is there a difference in types and styles of gossip between female-dominated sports, male-dominated, or even some of our club sports are both genders?
That is a great question, and we had to cut it out of my presentation because it just got too far into a different topic. But there was a huge difference between the way genders answered this question, especially one of the questions I asked that didn't make it as much onto the presentation is how would you handle hearing rumors about your teammates? And the boys' teams were very much like, that's my guy. At the end of the day, like, we're 11 and we have to be 11, and the girls were a lot more hesitant in that. Stuff like that. But thank you.
I know you said that at the end of it you found that gossip is generally not helpful. In your participants, did any of them cite gossip as being helpful? Like even in the negative pieces, like talking about someone behind the back of events that they don't want to be shared, like was there any sense of bonding between teammates when they hear that information?
Yes, one of my participants mentioned that it's connecting when you don't like the same person. Which, there's truth in that. So, thank you.
Any questions?
My very fascinating research, thank you for sharing. I was wondering, what's kind of the Venn diagram between gossip and information sharing? Are they completely different or do they overlap?
That's a great question. There was one article that I really based a lot of this research off of that took like over 3,000 definitions of gossip and kind of made criteria for it. And basically what they were saying is that they kind of they have more similarities than differences, because sharing information still is like behind someone's back. I personally think, and like through some of my research, it really comes into intent. So why are they sharing? Yeah, because like if I'm like, hey, did this person ever send you that email? That's not very gossipy. It's way more information.
Interesting research. I have a question for you based on not only your research but your lived experiences. Do you think people use gossip as a form of connection? That one way player leaders or coaches could control for that is more formal approaches to build more connections so people don't have to informally build it? Would that be helpful, do you think?
I do think that would be helpful, and I do think there's so much connection in gossip. So to answer your question, I do think the more connection that's on the team, the less gossip there will be. I was just talking to my friends about the field hockey team I was on senior year, and we were pretty mediocre, but we won state because we were all best friends, and we loved each other, and it was just like good vibes, and there was like literally no drama. It was such a dream. And so in that realm, we were so well connected that there wasn't even room or space, because we respected each other so much that we didn't even really talk about stuff like that. So I think yes.
Okay, well, I'd like to invite Professor Bettis to present this talk.
I just want to let the audience know how difficult it is to complete a research project in one semester. It is a big task to take on. This is something that we had talked about since last semester, and Amaya took it on gracefully and did a fantastic job, and so it has been an honor and a privilege to get to be your mentor.
Yes, I have one more announcement. As all of you know, I've been deciding where I'm going to grad school, and today I made that decision. I am going to the University of Houston!